We are here, Bible in a Minute, Chronological Gospels edition, looking at the genealogy of Matthew. Sorry, my brain froze for a second. So, when Matthew begins his gospel, he says this is the genealogy, and it corresponds with this Hebrew phrase, ele toldot, which appears 10 times in the book of Genesis. This helps us connect the story of Messiah Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Messiah, as a continuation of the narratives in Torah. And so this genealogy will confirm that he meets all of the requirements of him that the Torah puts on the Messiah. He has to be a descendant of Abraham, Genesis 22:18. He has to be a descendant of Jacob, Numbers 24:17. He has to be descending from the tribe of Judah, that's Genesis 49:10. A scepter will not depart, and I covered that in a Bible in a Minute video on the book of Genesis, chapter 49. He has to come through the line of Jesse, that's Isaiah 11:1. He has to come through the line of David, 2 Samuel 7:13, and he has to come through the line of Zerubbabel, and I'm listing them all here. So sorry, you probably didn't see that long enough to pause it, but you can go back. Zerubbabel is Haggai 2, verses 22 through 23. So David Stern, who wrote the Complete Jewish Study Bible, he also wrote the Jewish New Testament Commentary. Fantastic resource, and I'm going to use a lot of resources when I go through these videos to explain a lot of the context so that you can get it. But what's interesting is that when Matthew starts, he says, this is the genealogy, ele toldot, of Jesus Christ, right? And so a lot of translations just say Jesus Christ as if Christ was his last name. It is not. It was never his last name, right? Your last name in Israel in those days would have been the son of your father. So he would have been Yeshua ben Yosef, or ben Joseph, a son of Joseph. So Christ is not his last name. It's his title. So it really should say Jesus the Christ, or Yeshua the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach in Hebrew, because that's what he is. Messiah, Mashiach, and Christ, or Christos in Greek, all mean anointed one. And that was the title that was believed to be what the Messiah, that's what they would call the Messiah. He would be the anointed one, the one that God anointed to be the Messiah. And of course, ancient Jewish thought was that he would become the king, right? And he would. He would be the spiritual king and then the reigning king, conquering king, when he comes back a second time. But his first coming was intended to be the suffering king. So he is the king of Israel. Pilate even declared he was the king of the Jews. So just understand that when you read Jesus Christ, Christ is not his last name. Matthew establishes Jesus's messianic credentials through this genealogical record. And as I said briefly in the last video, it's incredibly important, because if Matthew doesn't prove this, that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, that he has the racial and royal credentials, nobody has to believe in him. It has to be proven. And of course, since Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, and tons, if not all, of the genealogical records were destroyed, when the temple and the city of Jerusalem were destroyed, it would be impossible to prove someone today being the Jewish Messiah. But we have this ancient record. So if there was someone who popped up and says, I'm the Messiah, you can't prove it. It's impossible to prove a genealogy at this point, because all these ancient records are gone. But Jesus could prove it. Matthew does prove it, because those records still existed at the time of Jesus's birth, and so we have proof that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. He fulfills all of these prophecies, and Matthew includes a ridiculous amount of prophecies in his gospel account, because he is trying to demonstrate Jesus fulfills every prophecy about the Messiah, even ones we would consider not even important, right? Jesus riding in on a donkey, on an unridden colt, essentially a baby donkey, right? He rides in on this donkey, and we would not even consider that an important thing, um, because we would say, Zechariah's prophecy is, I mean, what difference does it make if he rides in on a horse or rides in on a donkey? But it does make a difference. Zechariah prophesied it. Was it original to Zechariah? No, it was actually all the way tied back to Genesis. And you can watch the video on Genesis 49 when Jacob blesses Judah and he refers to a donkey being tied to the vine. One of Jesus's titles that he'll identify himself later on is the vine. And that when he enters the city, as during the triumphal entry, what we call Palm Sunday, he comes in on a donkey, on a colt, like a little young donkey. So it's so important to understand these prophecies and to see how Jesus fulfilled them. If he didn't fulfill them, he's not the Messiah. But if he did, then he is the Messiah, and we should put our faith and trust in them. So we'll pause there and stay tuned, because we're still in Matthew looking at the genealogies. It's important. God identifies himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we're like, oh man, those guys are so cool. No, there's scandal involved. Stick around and watch the next video to see what that really means for them and for us.